applied to somebody like Bartimaeus in a situation. We couldn't restart to update your device at the scheduled time. Your device may have been off. It may have had a low battery, or you're still using it. Well, Bartimaeus probably had a low battery because there wasn't a lot going on in his life. What little bit of his battery that he did have, he may have been using his device and energy from that device just to beg for a few coins to get enough money to have something to eat on. When he heard that Jesus was coming, he realized that he had a choice. He could choose to restart now or wait. He decided to restart now. A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting in Carol Williams' office. She's the administrator at Hallmark Nursing Home. She used to be at Generations Nursing Home out by Proctor Hospital in that little subdivision there. So she and I have had a long friendship together with each other. And I was visiting with her. And on the back of her wall, the wall behind her was one of those big inspirational plaques that had a beautiful scene on it. And it had these words on it: capability determines what you can do. Motivation determines what you will do. Attitude determines how well you will do it. I was really touched by that. I mean, I was moved, I was inspired, thinking about these different aspects of what causes people to do things, like in the call to worship that I shared, how Corrie ten Boom went through the same devastating, heartbreaking situation as many other Jews in the concentration camps, and yet she emerged from with a vibrant faith, and how even just the different music could affect the people's moods when they were watching the same scene from a Charlie Chaplin movie. And so I realized that attitude and motivation and capability are such an important part of everybody's life, including mine. And I had to think about that because honestly, there are times in my life that I don't feel very motivated. There are times in my life when I even doubt my own abilities, my own capabilities. Sometimes I think there's not much I can do. And sometimes, I'll tell you, I need an attitude adjustment. And I was going through that when I saw this on the wall behind my friend Carol Williams. And as I thought about how this and the restart message from the computer applies to our friend Bart, I wanted to take a look at Bart's capabilities. Remember, Bart was blind. Now, we live in a day and time where blind people and people with other limited abilities can certainly lead themselves and raise themselves up to a productive, energetic life. We had, Dave, I don't know if you ever met the crib man in Building HH, the blind man that worked in the crib in Building HH. I don't know if you ever. This guy was blind, and yet he had developed a sense of feel for threads on bolts, the size of the nuts that go on the bolts and washers. Guys would go up to the crib and they'd say to him, "Hey, George, I want a size 22 bolt. I want a 2-inch bolt with a 22 thread." And George would take that, "No, you want a 2-inch bolt with a 24-inch thread." They could not fool him. And he would go to the bin and get the right number of bolts. It's just amazing that he had developed his touch, his sense of touch, to that extent that he could tell the difference between a 22 thread and a 24 thread. And last year, I think it was, I preached a message about a blind man who had climbed the highest 7 peaks in the world. But back then, in those days, they didn't have Braille. They didn't have anything for a blind person to develop a productive, joy-filled life. And so Bart's capabilities were limited, but he could think, he could talk, and he could beg. I can't think of much more that he was capable of, But let's look at motivation. Since motivation determines what you will do, Bart's motivation was just to eke out a living. Beg enough coins from passers-by to buy enough food to have another meal to survive another day. Attitude determines how well you will do it. Well, Bart's attitude, the way it seems to me, was pretty dismal. He didn't have a lot to look forward to. You know, he clearly wasn't going to be allowed in the temple because he was like damaged goods. And so he didn't have obviously much of a social life, because who wants to hang out with beggars? Who wants to hang out with blind people in that day and time? So his attitude was probably pretty dismal. And then, okay. All right, I've got the wrong screen. Okay, so let me go to my phone, because I've got some other slides that you can't see, but I'll share with you what I came up with. Nope, I don't have it on there either. So let me back this up. Kathy, could you push full screen on that for the slides to go full screen up at the top? Yeah, no, over here in the top right-hand corner by the X, there's a couple of little boxes up there. Up here, yeah, right there, that'll go full screen. Or maybe, yeah. Or maybe we need to go to the slideshow. Yeah. Well, up at the top in the middle where it says slideshow, if you click on slideshow, right above that, yeah, click on that. Yeah. Okay. No? Okay, well. All right. Well, let's forget about technology and see what this poor old preacher can remember from what I was thinking. But I can go back on my slides and look at it. Okay, so what happened? What happened to Bart when things changed for him? Number one, he heard that Jesus was coming. You know, and friends, let me tell you something. There are things that can happen in our lives, in a person's life, when they meet Jesus for the first time. Now, if we were fortunate enough to be born and raised in a church, you know, we meet Jesus early in life, but there are some folks who don't meet Jesus until they're adults, maybe even halfway through the life or near the end of their life. But let me tell you, when you meet Jesus and get to know Jesus, things can change in your life. When there we go. Now we've got some slides going. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Let me mute myself.
So something happened to Bart's capabilities when he heard that Jesus was coming. What happened was, all of a sudden, he had motivation. He had heard the stories about what Jesus could do, the miracles that he could perform. So he had motivation, and that changed his attitude. Instead of having a dismal attitude, he had an attitude of hope. And so what did he do? He suddenly became capable of calling out in a loud voice, asking Jesus to have mercy on him. They tried to silence him. But listen to me, when you're in a situation where you're going to meet Jesus, there's no silencing that. People and circumstances can try to still the voice of Jesus getting through to people, but if people are in a situation where they're about to meet Jesus, nothing can come between Jesus and that person. And so all of a sudden he had this capability to cry out in a loud voice, begging for mercy instead of begging for coins. What happened then when the people said to him, "Cheer up, on your feet, he wants to talk to you"? Well, that motivation then sprang into action. All of a sudden, he was capable of jumping to his feet, throwing off his cloak, and finding his way to Jesus. Now, remember, Bartimaeus was blind. "Where are you, Jesus? I know you're out here." He finds Jesus. And then Jesus says, what do you want me to do? Oh, Rabbi, I want to see. All of a sudden, Bartimaeus had increase in his capabilities because suddenly he had motivation and he had an attitude shift. The same thing can happen in our lives. Even if we've known God, even if we've known Jesus for our whole life or for many decades, we can still have an increase in our motivation as Christians who follow Jesus. We can still have an increase in our attitude, an improvement in our attitude, and understand that every one of us may have capabilities within us that we didn't know about, that we've never tapped into. Now, let me tell you a story about when Diane and I were dating, and we fell in love, and I asked her to marry me, and she said, I do. No, it'll be good. No, I didn't get permission for this, but sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. But you see, I had also signed up and joined the Air National Guard. And when you join the military, they had to take an aptitude test. And there's several different categories on this aptitude test, and one of them was mechanical. I flunked that. They said, son, boy, you got absolutely zero zilch aptitude for mechanical. Don't ever touch a wrench, because it will not go well. But you see, then something happened. I married Harry Snyder's daughter. Now, Harry Snyder was this little guy that worked at Silco, and he was also a shade tree mechanic. He could do anything on a car back then, before computers. And he taught me how to work on a car. He knew how to install water heaters. I don't know how many water heaters Harry and I installed over the years. I became an operator at Caterpillar doing setups on hardening furnaces and induction hardening equipment, making changes, all the mechanical. How did I get that mechanical aptitude? How did I get that ability? Well, I met somebody who believed that I could do it. And right here in our own midst, and I know that many of you have probably got stories of coming to a place where you understand that you have abilities that you weren't aware of. A few years back, Colton Lott, you remember Colton Lott, right? Our student pastor intern that graduated from Eureka College, and he went up to Chicago School of Theology and Disciples Divinity House, and he came back here and he preached a sermon with me where we were acting out Jesus having breakfast of fish with the disciples on the shore after he'd been resurrected. And just before church that day, I asked Jill Jones if she would join in our skit and play the part of a waitress. Just like that, Jill said, well, yeah, I'll do that. She had never done anything like that in your life, had you? Yeah. Well, not in a church sermon. Okay. And then a couple of years later, I asked Jill if she would give the testimonial message on Laity Sunday. And so she stood up here and preached a sermon. You probably never thought you'd be preaching a sermon in church. So, the point is we all have abilities and capabilities that are dormant in our heart, in our mind, in our spirit. And sometimes, and I'm warning you, Jesus may tap into your abilities and your capabilities, may have you up here preaching a sermon someday. I never dreamed that I'd ever preach a sermon until Scotty Hewson asked me to fill in for him when he went to camp. And when I told Scotty Hewson I can't do that, yes, you can. And I believe Scotty because he believed in me. And here we are. So Jesus looked into Bart's heart and mind and spirit, and he said, this man has capabilities that he doesn't know about. When I said, call him to me, the man literally jumped to his feet and threw off his cloak and made his way to me. And now he wants to see. So Jesus touched him. and he was able to see. But what happened to his attitude after that? Jesus said, go, your faith has made you well. Bartimaeus said, no, I'm not going to go. I'm coming with you. His attitude had an adjustment when Jesus touched him. When Gene and Larry played our song, he touched me. And oh, the joy that fills my soul. Something happened. And now I know. He touched me and made me whole. That's what he did for Bartimaeus. That's what he's willing and able to do for any child of God here on the face of this earth. And the song that we had for our prelude today, I love that song. The chimes of time bring out the news. Another day is through. Someone slipped and fell. Was that someone you? Now that could apply to any one of us. You know, because no matter how closely we try to follow Jesus, no matter how sincere our heart's desire is to walk with Christ, we're still imperfect human beings and we can slip and fall. Someone slipped and fell. Was that someone you? I have news for you. That's what the song said. Do not be disheartened. I have news for you. It is no secret what God can do. What he's done for others, he'll do for you. With arms wide open, he'll pardon you. It is no secret what God can do. So when I saw this sign on the screen, it's time to restart, I realized it's not just time for a restart for Bartimaeus. It's time for a restart for Pastor Dwight. And it's time for a restart, I think, for every one of us. And it may be time for a restart for First Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Because it is no secret what God can do for our church. With arms wide open, he'll pardon us and he will lead us. And when he touches us, something happens. And he makes us whole. And he gives us faith, and he gives us strength, and he gives us courage, and he inspires us, and he leads us. It is time for a restart. Wait an hour or restart now? What's your choice? Amen.